Hi, my name is Ellis Hurley. I did my final project on hemolytic anemia. So in my presentation, I'll cover the cellular basis, the causes of the disease, and the future outlook, and what research is being done for future treatments. So starting out with just a brief introduction and the disease overview, hemolytic anemia is a disease that specifically affects the body's red blood cells, which are called erythrocytes, and they are responsible for transporting oxygen throughout the body. Because of this, hemolytic anemia does have a drastic impact on the rest of the body, as any loss of function with the red blood cells is going to affect oxygen transport to the rest of the body, as well as nutrient transport. And this happens because red blood cells lyse, which means they're killed, and the growth is also slowed to the point where they are dying off faster than they can be replenished by the bone marrow. And this is where the disease gets its name, because hemolytic anemia comes from hemolysis, which is the death of the red blood cells. It causes some symptoms including weakness, dizziness, confusion, poor cardiac function, including low blood pressure, jaundice, typically have some yellowing of the whites of the eyes and possibly even the skin, as well as in severe cases there's tissue degeneration and an overall lack of oxygen, trouble breathing, stuff like that. There are two types of hemolytic anemia. You can either have it where it's inherited, so it was passed down from your parents, or acquired, meaning that the onset was triggered by something else non-genetic. And it's often linked to other blood disorders as well. So the causes of the disease, it will differ depending on the type of hemolytic anemia a person has. With heritable hemolytic anemia, it's present since birth and usually linked by another genetic blood disorder, typically linked to genetic mutation, a mutated gene, whether it be for the cell membrane or causing thalassemia and sickle cell anemia can cause the rapid lysis of red blood cells. And then for acquired, there can be a variety of causes, and it typically presents later in life. Some of these causes include disease or infection, autoimmune disorders or cancers, and even certain medications like penicillin can trigger hemolytic anemia. So it's very important to find out what exactly is the cause if it's acquired. Whichever way the disease starts, it does progress similarly. According to the Cleveland Clinic, the typical lifespan for red blood cells is 120 days. With individuals who have hemolytic anemia, their red blood cells break down in less than 120 days. So at such a quick pace, their bone marrow can't produce enough cells to replace them quickly enough, which is going to cause the symptoms of anemia. So just looking a little bit deeper into the disease, going into the cellular level, what's actually happening with these red blood cells, a lot of times through research they found that hemolysis is linked to, in this disease, a weakened membrane function. Makes them more susceptible. The membrane is the first line of defense for the cell. Selectively permeable, supports the cell structure, so without its function, cells are left weakened and they're more susceptible to lysis. It also, the destruction of these red blood cells will affect the other cells in the body. It can slow down cellular respiration because oxygen carried throughout the bloodstream by the red blood cells, and oxygen is our final electron acceptor in cellular respiration, so without it, makes that a lot harder. And there's also nutrient deficiencies. It exhibits itself as fatigue and dizziness. It also does affect a couple important enzymes. Lactate dehydrogenase, shortened to LDH, is typically found in healthy red blood cells, but whenever they begin to die off, it's released into the bloodstream. An elevated LDH can indicate hemolytic anemia. It can also be triggered by a deficiency in pyruvate kinase, which is an enzyme assisting in cellular respiration and the production of ATP. And it is rare, but it severely affects the lifespan of red blood cells and can cause hemolytic anemia. It can also be triggered or exacerbated by cancer, so checkpoints such as the RAS gene that we've talked about that control cell division, if they are mutated or otherwise edited to where cell growth is out of control, it can cause some hemolytic anemia. And then, as we've learned in class, there is a structural organization to life, so what happens at the bottom can influence the hierarchy of organization, and if cells are dying, tissues will degenerate and organ systems can fail. There is a genetic link, obviously with heritable anemia, it is genetically linked. Mutations that weaken or compromise the cell structure, and then that, of course, if it is inherited, these the next generation will have symptoms of hemolytic anemia. One major link that they've found is hereditary spherocytosis, which is a disease that directly causes hemolytic anemia, can be inherited through autosomal or recessive, dominant or recessive gene mutations, and it causes congenital hemolytic anemia. And gene markers on ANK1, SLC4A1, and SPTA1 can cause dominant allele mutations leading to HS. So when it's dominant like that, only one parent has to have the allele for the offspring to be affected. And then the link between cancer and hemolytic anemia is not as straightforward, but as I mentioned previously, failure to regulate the cell cycle can lead to premature lysis. And genetic testing is not routinely done specifically for hemolytic anemia. However, if someone is showing symptoms, it is possible to get them tested. So this just goes into a little deeper detail about red blood cell lysis. It can be through toxins or pathogens, like with infection, autoimmune hemolytic anemia. The immune system attacks red blood cells, mistaking them for foreign bodies, and then they may be destroyed by the spleen or within the bloodstream. To diagnose this disease, it's normally not tested for at birth or with routine genetic tests. It is typically dependent on symptoms, not part of your regular physical. So once symptoms appear, your doctor is going to most likely order a blood work panel, a CBC to evaluate blood cell count, to tell if you're deficient in red blood cells. A blood smear might be done to look at any abnormalities in cell shape, and then LDH can also be measured. A Coombs test is going to test for autoimmune hemolytic anemia, and then it's not as routine, but genetic testing may be requested if it's suspected that this is from a hereditary source. So what can be done? Scientific research is constantly advancing medicine. It will give us new ways of treating and studying diseases, and research into the genetic background of hemolytic anemia may give doctors a better understanding of the underlying risks and causes. And treatment and cures. Cure is a little bit of a difficult definition to pin down for this disease because there are so many different causes. So your treatment is going to vary mainly based on the type and severity of the disease. For people with acquired hemolytic anemia, the goal is to first discover what caused it and then treat the source, so hopefully curing the disease. However, with inherited hemolytic anemia, it's likely going to be chronic, and the focus is going to be on treating symptoms and improving quality of life. Doctors are going to want to act quickly to optimize recovery. They'll evaluate organ function, do blood work, specifically looking at the heart and spleen and liver, since the spleen and liver will be trying to filter out all of these lysed red blood cells. A lot of times steroid medications are a common way of treating hemolytic anemia, but in severe cases, the patient might need to be stabilized and given a blood transfusion. There are some ways to prevent acquired hemolytic anemia with healthy diet, cardiovascular fitness, vitamin supplements, and proper hygiene to prevent infections. Finally, with some emerging research that may offer hope on the horizon, it can Anemia itself is broad and can emerge in several different forms, so doctors and researchers are still looking into the causes and proper treatment of hemolytic anemia, but it is expanding. So there have been strides made in understanding the genetic markers, such as research into sickle cell anemia and thalassemia, which can be helped with gene therapy, so going in and actually altering those mutated or dysfunctional genes. There is a new medication that has been FDA approved to treat pyruvate kinase deficiency. It's called Pyrukynd, I believe that's how you say it, and it has been FDA approved, so hopefully that can also help people with that deficiency that leads to hemolytic anemia. And then these medical advances can help improve the quality of life, but it's still important to keep researching on how to properly address acute and chronic hemolytic anemia, as well as continue to search for a cure for those with the inherited version of the disease. For the final outlook, the manner of hemolytic anemia can vary from person to person. It's characterized by the premature destruction of red blood cells and may be inherited or acquired. If left untreated, it can have devastating effects on the bodily systems, but treatment can halt disease progress or manage the symptoms successfully. And finally, new genetic research is on the rise to potentially help those with inherited hemolytic anemia, so the future, I would say, is bright. And then I did include my references. All right, thank you.